there. It's I have Ray Augé here with me. Ray, thank you so much for taking time to meet with me today. You're in Ontario, in the other side of Canada, 5 hours by plane for me, and it's over 9 p.m. for you right now. Thank you so much, Ray. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do today?
Hi, Marcelo. Marcelo, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm principal software engineer for Liferay, and I've been a software engineer slash architect for about 10 years. But I've been in software. I've been working for Liferay for 19 years, and I've been doing software for about 21 years. Um, so yeah, I yeah, that about 20 years, and I have a previous career before that I started from. Uh, so Maybe we'll get into that in a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah, a little bit. So, just going back into a life, I know that you mentioned to me offline that you had a different career before you go into programming. But I'm just curious in terms of going back in time and how did the technology come into your life, and how did you get some the early exposures to computers? I'm not sure was your previous job, your previous career, or the new career. How did technology come into your life? How was that experience?
So I mean, I'm 51, so I
Just a kid.
was just a kid, but I guess uh, being my age, I got to see basically the dawn of computing. Maybe not the very dawn, but the dawn of consumerized computing. So when I was young, I would say 12, 13 years old, my parents bought one of the very first computers in our small town that we were desktop computers, right? It was an 8088 Intel. Um, so yeah, we're talking like 4 megabytes of RAM, 4 megabytes of hard drive space, 64 kilobytes of RAM, around something like that. So the very very earliest PCs that you could get, and when we got that, I mean, we were doing, there was no Windows. That was before Windows. You only had DOS, um, and so my parents used this computer for their work, but they let us play with it so that we could kind of learn a little bit about this new technology. And we fiddled, we played games, sprite games, the very early, like very very earliest games, and I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed that a lot. Um, but it was really just um, not. I wouldn't say I got into programming or anything like that till much much later. Um, yeah, or the early days was really just gaming on those very very uh, first generation type games that were put out.
Yeah, pretty cool. And it's kind of interesting how many guests, when I ask the question, they always mention gaming, right? So
Yeah,
many
yeah,
people got their first exposure to computers through gaming, and that generated some curiosity that kept them going, which is really interesting.
that's right.
Being Canada, I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit. How was elementary school for you? How was high school, and did that include any exposure to computers and technology as well, or not at all?
So primary school didn't have computers yet at that time. So that would have ended in the mid '80s, right? When my early '80s primary school computers probably hit my schooling. I would say in grade 10ish. I would mid '80s. Uh, and that would have been my first classroom exposure to computers. And it was, I don't remember if you know what a Commodore PET was.
Of course, I did.
Commodore was, I guess, the main competitor to IBM at the time, and they had these very console like large console like computers that they would install in schools, and it was basic. That's what it was. We were learning basic operation, like the language basic,
Mhm.
but not to any degree, not to any significant programming degree. I think the basic, I think essentially it was text based, uh, word processing that we were doing. Learning how to type on a computer as opposed to just on a typewriter. So yeah, I wouldn't say even then that I was very much interested in that aspect of it or into computing at that point. I was much more of a music nerd. So through my high school, I was a music nerd. I was a bass player in a stage band, and I competed, and that's really where all of my energy went when I was in high school.
Cool.
Yeah, I was a band nerd.
I had Commodore 64 at some point in time. It was a good computer at the time, and I enjoyed some of the video games. And yeah, Commodore had. I think we went through some similar times in history, and seeing the whole industry coming up was quite a privilege,
Yeah.
and bring some good memories when you mention Commodore. And talking about your music passion at the time, there was there any experiment with using computers for music or at the time, or not at all?
At the time, I would say no. Mainly because I don't think that it had evolved yet very much. I suppose the most techie aspect of music at the time would have been the dawn of like musical sequencers and drum machines and digital keyboards. Like synthesizers or the you know, those were just kind of becoming more mainstream at the time. Computers were there, but they were really for the high end techie kind of musician,
Mhm.
right? So I wasn't really exposed to it much at that point. There were a few, people that I knew that were involved, but again, I wasn't a computer nerd yet. That came much later.
Ray, how did you get from high school to your first job? I know you mentioned to me you worked on a factory, I believe, right? So I'm not sure if did you go from high school straight into a factory kind of business, or did you take a different path in life at the time?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because I started when I was always the youngest of my schooling generation. I was always the youngest kid in every class. I graduated high school when I was 17, and I went to college at that time for music. Um, but as a 17-year-old going into college, I guess you could say I probably didn't have the maturity to actually
Yeah.
self study, because as you know, post secondary is kind of like self study, right? You have classes, but they don't really care whether you attend or not. You have to motivate yourself, and I was probably too young to motivate myself to attend college wholeheartedly. So fortunately, I had already started working for my with my father's company, who was a contractor, and it wasn't necessarily a factory. It was more industrial mechanic.
I
So I
see.
began an apprenticeship uh, to become an industrial mechanic when I was 16, and I continued into my while I was in college, I was still working on the weekend, working as an industrial mechanic. And so between my age of not having, not really having the maturity to focus on school, but also have a fairly good paying job at the time, so I didn't really have a strong motivation, and my college career at that point only lasted one less than 1 year actually, and so I devoted myself much more to becoming an industrial mechanic in the following years, and that's how I got into that career, was basically getting the opportunity from my family and from my father and my older brothers. And I come from a family with lots of children. I'm one of 11s, and many of my older brothers were industrial mechanics, and my father and my uncles. So it was kind of like a family tradition, and so I I went into that. I enjoyed it. It was more seasonal, so it allowed me to have a lot of free time as well as getting paid fairly well. And I really enjoyed it, and that's where I stayed for the next decade. essentially.
Can you tell us a little bit of what kind of work did you do as part of
So
that job?
yeah, in an industrial mechanic, it's called a millwright that's the name of the trade, but it really what it is an industrial mechanic. And so what industrial mechanics or millwrights do is they assemble and maintain factory machinery. So for instance, paper mills, steel mills, car manufacturing, any kind of manufacturing that you could think of usually has industrial processes and large machinery that needs to be maintained, and that's what we did. We, as a construction millwright, a construction industrial mechanic, our my typical role was to go onto jobs where they were installing or repairing machinery in these factories as opposed to maintaining them. That would be like the in-house maintenance industrial mechanics. But as a construction mechanic, I would go from factory to factory at different times of year to repair, either to do a large scale repairs or to install brand new machinery, paper machines, steel processing machines, conveyor systems, pumps, um, uh, uh, you know, any large kind of processing. And because I live in northern Ontario, the main industries that I was working in were pulp and paper manufacturing, because there were lots of pulp and paper mills in the region, but also mining. So uh, ore processing plants, for instance. I never went into the mines myself, but I worked in the processing plants. So yeah, it was. I actually really liked it, and I really I I don't want to say that I excelled at it. I really enjoyed it, and I was pretty good at it. I would say I liked doing it, and it was an interesting career because it was a very often changing. So I liked change and working on new challenges all the time, and that career was
Yeah.
particularly well suited to uh, that kind of interest, right? So I really
Yeah,
liked it.
and it's kind of interesting because we may think that what you do today is very different because you're dealing software, but in a sense, looking back into the engineering work that you did, or the mechanic engineering work that you did, you're still dealing with challenges. You're still doing some complex challenge that you had to address, right? So even though you're not creating necessarily software, you're still putting machinery together. You have parts that you have to make sure they work together. Likely some analogy here, interfaces and other things that have to work together to produce a result at the end of the show. So there's some analogies here that we can take in terms of computer programming, right? So you mentioned,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you mentioned that that was you were in the industry for 10 years or a decade, right? So I think that's what you said.
Yes. Yes.
And how was it? How did you get into? At some point in time, you said, I don't think you said it's time to transition to programming. I think you went through some um, life change events that triggered your change, right? So can you tell
Right.
us a little bit about that?
So in '98, I remember it well. Towards the at the end of the spring of '98, I was working on one of these jobs where it was a maintenance in a factory, and I was involved in an accident, which caused me to break my legs and crush my left ankle, or my right ankle, sorry. And so that I'm not sure if you're familiar with the health system and the social programs in Canada or in Ontario, but basically what happened is that caused me to have some physical limitations on the type of work. So I was compensated for that loss of work by being given the opportunity to do vocational retraining, right? Uh, it wouldn't have been suitable to go back to that kind of labor intensive career with the limitations that I had, suffered due to the accident, right? So I was given the opportunity to go and get some retraining. And when I went through the process of uh, being assessed, they allowed me to choose to go to university. And so I jumped at the opportunity. I was By that time I was 28 years old, and so I jumped at the opportunity to go to university. It was something I had always hoped always wished I had done, but I never really was in a situation to do that. And so when I was given the opportunity, I jumped at it. But it didn't come without its challenges, because I was already married and had one child at the time. And when it came, so I went to the local university and I started in the engineering program. And my second child was born on the end of the first week of the semester that I started school. So I had two children going to university, and for anyone who's been to university, it's already challenging enough, but
No kidding.
to
Yeah.
have children and be going to university was was a challenge, but it was a challenge I was anxious to kind of get be part of. Let's say.
It's
um
really it's sorry if you allowed me to interrupt, but it's really fascinating how things happen in life that take in a completely different course of. I'm quite sure you're not expecting you work
Absolutely.
in your industrial mechanic job, and I don't think you had an expectation that you'd be changing careers anytime soon, right? So eventually something happens, and thankfully an opportunity pops up, and you go into a university course, which is a challenge itself, and you have a young family, you're dealing with all at the same time. Which course did you take, Ray? Would you mind sharing which institution did you go to?
So
Must
I
be
I went to
somewhere on that.
Laurentian. Yeah, I went to Laurentian University in Sudbury, which is the most local university to where I grew up. A small university of about 5 or 6 thousand, maybe 8,000 in those years. Yeah, it's about 8,000, I guess. So a smallish university, community university in the area. And they had they're known mostly for their earth sciences and engineering programs, particularly mining and so on. But I was having come from an industrial mechanical career previously. I thought it would be most suitable to go into mechanical engineering. So I started the first 2 years that I was at university. I actually took mechanical engineering, um, and that was really interesting. Unfortunately, by the second year, I had exhausted, because the that university, being that it was a very small university, they didn't have a complete um, mechanical engineering program. They only offered the first 2 years, and if you wanted to continue the engineering program, they allowed you to transfer to some other universities in the province to complete it. But at the time, being that I was married, I had two children, it was gonna be, a significant and not a non-trivial thing to move to another city with my family for school. So I opted to take a different choice. And what I did was I looked at the studies that I had, you know, everything that I had learned. And I was fortunate enough that I took a computational engineering program. The computational engineering course was essentially snapshots at 10 different computational languages, uh, to give you insight as an engineer. And the goal of that course was to give engineers access or insight into programming tools that would help an engineer develop their skills and understand how they could do complex analysis and complex, write programs to solve problems, right, uh, to to do calculations. So it was a fairly low level course. We did 10 different programming. technologies, different languages. We did Excel, but we also did Fortran. We did Maple V, which is a statistical analysis program. So it was kind of like a snapshot into 10 different computing technologies, one of which was shell programming. And so when I looked back and I was trying to make a decision, okay, well, where do I go from here, from mechanical engineering, and where do I, what's my next choice? I looked back at this course and I was like, well, that was really interesting. I really enjoyed that computational part. So, fortunately, the university had a computer science department that was, offered a full program. So I said, well, that seems like a fairly natural stepping stone. And fortunately, uh, all of my credits in engineering transferred directly into the computer science program, and all I had to do was catch up on a couple of core programs. So it was quite an easy transfer. I did a couple of summer courses to catch up, and honestly, it was much more interesting than so I had enjoyed and I was interested in mechanical engineering, but I guess when I switched into fully into computer science, I think I found my niche much more of a comfort level, and I really enjoyed it. So I yeah, it was a happy decision, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm still amazed how life changes, right? So things happen, and you go into a completely different path that you're not expecting to go, but all of a sudden, let's put it this way, you find your call, right? So you
that's right.
you get there and you like it, you like what you're seeing, you think it's even better than what you had before, and there you go, right? So you move forward. So can you tell us a little bit more? How did the course progress, and what else did you learn about the course? And eventually you got into your first job into working as a professional engineer, the software developer engineer at the time, right? Can you tell us a little bit of that path?
Yeah. I would say one thing about my education that I guess, uh, if we think about, if we go back just for a minute, I was 28 when I started in university, which meant I was already the oldest student in every class that I attended with, and I was competing against 18, 19-year olds who were starting, and so I did feel a little bit behind in that, and so I actually felt like I was behind, and so I think that motivated me to kind of find ways that I could distinguish myself from them. I knew I wasn't going to necessarily beat them on the the grade point average. I was doing well in school, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be the 4.0 student that others were, and so being that I was older, I kind of saw that as potential crutch, uh, and not like I had to balance family life with the schooling life and the studies and the education, which was already a fairly difficult load. So I guess what I tried to do was to find alternative ways to um, make myself kind of or be significant, distinguish myself, I guess, from the pack. And how I did that was I volunteered for virtually every professor-led study or professor-led or exercise where they needed additional hours put in for time. So, for instance, when I was in my second semester, once I started into computer science, so this would have been my third year, but I was still only a second year computer science student. One of the professors wanted to do a course on IT technologies, basically on web technologies. It was so they wanted to offer a bunch of choices to the students of the course to pick a technology and then do web development with that technology: PHP, Perl, Java, whatever technology they chose. So uh, I volunteered to do the IT for that course. So he gave me a bunch of old lab computers. I think there was like 7 or 8 old lab computers, and he said, "Okay, learn Unix, learn Linux, and by the start of the next semester, I want you to be able to provide different installations of different technologies like PHP and Perl so that people can run their applications." And that was really fun. I really learned a lot, and I loved that. I guess that was probably where I fell most in love with shell scripting, because at the time there was no Kubernetes, there was no Puppet, there was no orchestration software of any significant type. Really, all you had were shell scripts. So if you wanted to automate processes or anything, you really just only had that. There was nothing else around to any significant way. So I really learned a lot about shell scripting. I learned a lot about Apache web server. I learned a lot about hosting PHP and CGI, different CGI stacks on top of HTTP Apache HTTP. There was no Nginx then. It was all Apache HTTPD server. Um, yeah, so I probably learned more in assisting that professor and being the sysadmin for that course. And it was a course for third year students, and I was still only a second year student. So they were coming to me. I kind of had an in, almost like a TA to the third year students. So I also learned a lot from the third year students, because they had different ideas and had learned other things, and they would ask me questions. Okay, so this is what I want to do. Oh, I don't know anything about that. So explain to me what you're trying to do, and we'll figure it out, right? So the interaction that I also got with the students and the faculty on that project was immensely valuable. So if I were to recommend something to students to distinguish themselves, I would highly suggest like trying to find those kind of niche tasks, because they always exist in every university. There's always faculty trying to do some kind of research or develop, new ideas, or look for ways to use technology. And so look around, go to your professors, ask them questions if they do have any of these, and try to learn something new. Again, I had no experience doing this. I just dove in, and it was really invaluable, and the course went really well, and it was really fun, and I learned a huge amount.
Learn by doing and
That's
having
right.
exposure, like getting
That's right.
exposure to Linux and shell scripting, and it's knowing what you do today. It's just the beginning of learning a whole bunch of stuff that you still use to date, right? So it's just incredible, and I can see
Exactly.
how your eyes shine when you talk about that, which I'm sure was pretty important in your path. And then
Yeah.
you evolved through that, and you likely got into your first job as a software engineer outside of university, right?
Yeah. So again, the circumstances were that I was in a fairly small city where there weren't a lot of Sudbury, Ontario is a city. Well, it's a small city of less than 100,000 or around 100,000 people. So, I wouldn't say it's the Silicon Valley where there's lots and lots of IT careers to choose from. Fortunately, and due to my decision to try to distinguish myself and to learn about IT, I actually made myself known enough to the university that a month after I graduated, they offered me a job in the IT department. So um, I was fortunate enough to get that, to have that opportunity and to work, and it was essentially to be the system administrator for the learning management system that they were trying to put online. And so this was in the early 2000. We're talking 2002, 2000 and actually, so 2004. um, that was just around the dot com, kind of the end of the dot com boom, or just about there, right? So learning management systems were fairly new technology at the time. And so the university was just in its adoption phase. They needed someone to take on the responsibility, and so I became essentially a one-stop shop. The support team, the technical team, the instructional team for an LMS that all the faculty would use, that all the students would be registered for their courses on, and we offered around 200 courses in the very first semester that we had an LMS. So it was, that summer was spent um, many hours trying to figure out how to get the data. So that was the first task. The first task was getting the data out of the student information system, which was the registration system, into this LMS system for the course registration. And I remember that my managers at the time told me, we tried this last year, and what we did is we took this giant stack of papers which had all the students' names on all the courses, and we hired 12 interns, and they did data entry for 2 months, just registering everybody in their courses. And it was like, no, 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 I don't want to do that. That sounds horrible. So, is there not an API on the student information system that we could just call to get the student and their registrations? They were like, we don't know. We don't know anything about this. So I got in contact with the LMS vendor. I got in contact with the student information system vendor. I basically built a bridge for the APIs and uh, built the proof of concept to do auto registration. That was my very first professional software project, was to write an integration interface from a student information system to an LMS. And my managers at the time thought I was a wizard, and I wrote probably 500 lines of PHP code, but then they didn't have to hire any interns, so it basically saved them a bunch of money. And I just had a click of a button, and I actually got my manager, here, you want to register all the students, just click this button. So it was almost like wizardry at the time, right? And all it is just a few lines of code in the back that spoke from one API to another. And I'm sure if I looked at that code today, I'd be horrified. But at the time, it was magic to everyone who had no idea, right?
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine it solved the problem, right? So helped save
it's
money as well. So it's
exactly.
exactly.
It did take me many hours though to get to that point. Way more hours than I first told, and fortunately, I was willing to commit to it. And I worked way too many hours in those first days. My wife will attest to that.
So how did the life evolve from there? So how, did you progress on the same job for a few years, or how did
Actually, actually no. So with that with that success came high expectations. The next projects that were assigned was to build a student portal that integrated the student information systems, the LMS, and then the university wanted to add access to the library, the digital libraries, and they basically had a grand vision of doing essentially a portal. And this was 2004, 2005. Portals were in their infancy, and so the other the other caveat or limitation was that there was essentially no budget. So finding a solution was purely based on what was available in the
Mhm,
open source. So that was also, fortunately for me, I had, you remember I told the story about this IT project that I did in my second year of university, right? My third year university, my second year computer science program. So I learned about all these IT software stacks,
mhm.
and that was really my first exposure to open source. So a couple of years goes by, and now I'm in this IT position, and there's requests to build this elaborate, complex solution. And so I looked back and said, okay, if this is the only viable route here is to go look into the open source world to see if there's somebody who's already done this kind of thing. And so that's when I discovered JBoss Portal and Liferay Portal. Again, both of them, they're in their infancy, and there were various other portals at the time as well. So I took about a month and did some analysis on the different open sources. I downloaded, the different available options. I played with them a little bit, and in the end, I actually selected JBoss Portal because it was written in Java, and that was the language that I had that I had done my university career in. So I felt most comfortable. At the time, I needed a little bit of more functionality. I needed a better content management system. And when I looked at JBoss Portal, they didn't really have a content management system at all. So I had to second guess my choice. Fortunately, when I second guessed my choice, it made me take another look at Liferay. And when I took another look at Liferay, I realized, holy geez, this has a CMS built in, and it has another half dozen or dozen functionalities that could be useful in other use cases. So I changed my mind and I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna build it on Liferay. And so I downloaded I downloaded the software and basically started learning about portlets. And that was the other thing that interested me. I was hoping to build something against the specification, because if I built against the specification, I would have less vendor lock-in, right? I didn't want to pin myself down at the time, which fortunately was it proved to be moot, because I ended up uh, using Liferay, and in the end, I became the vendor because I went from the university to working for Liferay. So I actually first, before working for Liferay, I became a community member,
Mhm.
and that was a very rewarding experience, because I I got to participate and learn techniques and technologies and programming from other people who were doing this in other scenarios. The community at the time of Liferay was large in my mind. Being a small town boy from up north in Canada, my perception of Liferay and its technologies was essentially that they were like Oracle, right? That they were that size of company delivering a product, because I used different softwares, right? MySQL, Liferay, JDKs, different, and so these software vendors, to me, it was an opaque thing. At the time, I guess I really didn't understand the size and scope of what these different organizations were.
Mhm.
Little did I know that Liferay was 5 or 6 people at that time, working
Mhm.
in a small office in a church in Diamond Bar. And so, anyways, I got to know the engineers working on that project, primarily Brian Chan and Brian Kim, and all the Brians. Basically, there were the 5 Brians, and at the time, yeah, it was fun. And so it was a huge learning experience as well, to participate in an open source community, get feedback, make contributions, and be productive, right?
Yeah.
Which
Uh,
led. Sorry, go ahead.
that was amazes me because going back through your story here. So going back to the manufacturing time and the industrial engineering kind of work you're doing, mechanical engineering work you're doing. All of a sudden, you have your accident that threw a wrench in a way to the equation, right? So you went into college, you're still working on the industrial mechanic engineering kind of a course, and then they don't have that. You'd have to move somewhere else, and you go, this computer thing is interesting. You go into the computer course, right? So and then you go work for the university, and you do your wizardry kind of work there that impress people, and they go, oh, there's a bigger challenge here, and you go look into the options you have, and you get into a community which is open source, which is something that I tell to some of the kids in the programming group in Brazil. If they ask us, how do I find a job? And one of the things I say is get involved with open source, because if you start contributing to some of those projects, that may open door for you, right? And that's exactly what
Absolutely.
happened to you. So you went to
Absolutely.
contribute to the community with Liferay, and then Brian finds you, and you got a job with Liferay. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment in life, and how was that connection? How did you get to work for Liferay?
Yeah, well, so I had selected Liferay as a product to build this content management system, this portal for students. One of the requirements that my managers made, I it was a bilingual university. And so and this is bilingual, it was a requirement. In other words, it was a federal requirement that since they were in a bilingual jurisdiction, they had to comply with serving bilingual content. And so one of the limitations of content management system, that particularly the one in Liferay, was that it didn't have localization features. And so there was a gap there. um, I needed to come up with a solution to this multi-language problem. How am I going to be able to take this open source product? It does most of what I need, but it doesn't have this one feature. And what do you do? Well, if you don't have the funds to buy the solution, you build the solution if you can, right? So that's the other approach. So I went to I communicated within the community, and I spoke to Brian Chan, and I messaged and I said, like, how likely would it be, how complicated would it be to build localization into the content management system? And Brian at the Chan responded, and he said, that's too complicated. We don't have time to invest in that. We're not going to do it. Um, and I was like, okay, this paints me into a corner here, because my choice is no longer looking so good. But it's open source, so let's take a crack at this, contributing a a solution to this problem, which I need to solve. And so I hacked together some ugly code and a solution that was working well enough in my mind, um, and then I contributed it. And when Brian saw it, he was amazed, not necessarily because of the quality of the code, but because I think the effort involved, right? He was like, wow, someone's willing to actually contribute a fairly significant feature to the product without, having been too much involved in it. So he respected that, and he was like, okay, we really like your we really like what you're doing. So we're going to make it happen. We like that you've done the heavy lifting, and so we're gonna accept your change. But of course, they did lots and lots of rewriting of that code after they accepted it. But they accepted it, and so that was like a feather in my cap. From that point forward, it was like, hey, I've contributed something fairly significant to, like it doesn't need to be significant, but it just happened to be that way at the time. It was significant to me. It was significant to the task that I was assigned and could deliver on. Right. So um, that was, like I said, it was a fairly important milestone for me personally to have been able to accomplish this. And so over the next several months, I started to get involved more and more with the everyday coding and maintenance of the Liferay product. And I think within the first few months, Brian said, well, we don't have a tech lead for our LMS. Sorry, we don't have a tech lead for our CMS. Since you know it inside and out now and you've contributed to it, why don't you become the tech lead for the CMS? So I became the tech lead, and I was still only part of the community, and I wasn't working for Liferay yet. Um, so as the months rolled by, I Brian asked me to actually, would you be interested in coming to work for us? And I said, well, again, being a small town boy and thinking like this is like an Oracle in California somewhere, some big mega company, I was a little bit intimidated, to say the least, about the prospect of working remotely. Yeah,
Of
again,
course.
we're talking 2004, and I'm going to go. The prospect of working remotely for a company in a different country
Mm.
was almost overwhelming to me, and so I turned him down at first, and actually that's not right. I didn't turn him down, but I said I won't be able. I don't know if I can go and work for you full time, so I'll work for you part time. Uh, but I won't be able to do that. Like today, when I'm working on Liferay, I'm doing it at work at a university, and if you want me to work for you part time, I won't be able to do that at work. I obviously will have to do this on my own time at home, but I don't have a very good computer. And this is a funny story. Brian Chan calls his wife, who is Karis Chan, and she's the financial manager of Liferay, right? And he tells her, "I want you to buy a computer with these specifications and ship it to this guy in Canada that I just met, so that he can work for us." And she was like, "What? That's crazy! You're like, what do you? That's absurd! As if we would do that." So, anyways, he's like, "No, no, no. He's a really good guy. He's gonna come and work for us part time, and he's living in Canada. He needs a new computer." So Brian bought me a computer and had it shipped from California to Canada so that I would have a good enough hardware to do this part time work.
Were you the first remote worker for Liferay?
I was the very first remote worker for Liferay, and I was the very first employee hired, poached from the community at Liferay. There were many, many more poached from the community after that, but I was the first.
That's
Um,
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't the first open source community member that contributed software, because I think Jorge Ferrer, if you remember Jorge Ferrer,
Yeah, I
he was
remember.
the he
Yep.
had been working on a very large
Spain.
project in
Mhm.
Spain for many years with Liferay before that. But he did come and work for Liferay after I had already started. So yeah, I was the first community member hired as an employee to Liferay in
That's fantastic.
2005, at near the end of 2005.
So it's
And
been
so yeah,
19 years, 19 years now since
exactly.
that time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been 19
And
years.
I'm sure you did a couple of additional contributions to the product.
Yeah. Um, I don't think I have the high line code count anymore. I'm fairly certain that I've been passed probably by several different other engineers at this point. But at one point, even I think 5 6 years ago, I was probably still in the top 4 or 5 contributors of Liferay code. Uh,
It's
yeah,
that's absolutely fantastic, and it's an incredible story, and it doesn't stop to amaze me, right? So all the different things that took place to get you to where you are today. And it's a 19-year career just with Liferay, right? Which is
that's right.
quite amazing. So quite a success story, and all the contributions we have made to this product. And you saw the company going from like 5 people, handful of people, to over 1,000 people, and
Yeah,
a base worldwide, right? So which is quite something.
yeah. When I actually started, so when I first began to contribute, the company was 5 or 6 people. When I finally got hired, I believe they were already somewhere between 25 and 35. I don't quite remember exactly what the number, but it was very early in the Liferay. Liferay had only incorporated 1 year before I got hired. In 2000, they were incorporated in 2004, and I got hired in 2005. So they were scaling up fairly quickly even then.
And Ray, fast forward to today, and like you said, you have done piles and piles of contributions to the Liferay product. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing today and some of the work you do for the cloud group?
Right. Today, I I wouldn't say that I'm responsible for, but I'm a part of a team that is responsible for the, the evolution of the Liferay Cloud product from a delivery perspective, from delivering new functionalities. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Marcelo. You,
You're
um,
doing,
for
you're
the
doing good, man. You're doing good.
so I'm a principal engineer on the teams involved in maintaining the Liferay Cloud Stack, which is Liferay's infra, uh, platform as a service environment or offering. And so that technology is built uh, on Kubernetes. It's also it runs in Google Cloud Platform. It uses a variety of technologies like relational databases, um, all of the network stack involved in the isolation, the automation of deployment of environments, the provisioning of resources, um, the the information gathering, or the visibility into, the operational visibility, like the logging and the metrics and the analysis of that software. But all of that is specifically or particularly focused on delivering Liferay's product in a cloud environment. And so it's highly focused on how to deliver Liferay's product in the best possible way for our customers. And there's various aspects that have grown over the time since I've been involved. We've gone from just a pure platform as a service to having a software as a service offering, and expanding the capabilities of the software as a service model with a cloud-based extensibility model, which we call client extensions. And so uh, Liferay product itself is highly extensible. But in order to make that extensibility cloud native, it involved, different technology choices. And so I was heavily involved in designing a cloud native extensibility model for the Liferay product as well. And that's now being rolled out, uh, you know, not only in our software as a service stack, but now just into our platform as a service stack for our customers as well.
Ray, when you look back to your Commodore days, and you look back to your beginning of your Bash scripting learning, and you look at things like the cloud and Kubernetes and all the technology and stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, what crosses your mind? Do you miss those old days in a sense, or do you prefer the challenges and the tooling that we have today, or how do you see the evolution of things since the good old days, I should say?
Well, I see obviously huge benefits, but I also have a bit of nostalgia towards the the regular old scripting models. But again, you have to, when you think about computing, the goal is always to reduce the cognitive cost, right? To reduce the amount of user effort involved in achieving a goal. In the early days, you could get to what you wanted, but it usually involved much more effort than it does today. And so we have much more uh, agility and ability and capability with the tools we have today, like Kubernetes for orchestration, things like Helm for defining the manifests of the resources that you want to deploy, things like Argo CD that keeps your environments to a stable state and shows you the status, and all the logging infrastructures and the aggregators involved, and all the metric systems that do analysis for you, and the event management. You can get a huge amount of feedback now. Is the in the days gone by when you would have had to script all of that, you would have had to write all of those, every single aspect of those things manually, which was done. Obviously, the Kubernetes is not a first generation product, right? There were many. If you even go back 5 years, there was a huge war, I would say, even between Kubernetes and things like Envoy and other choices, and uh, other competitors, and so uh, the there's a lot to be said about what you know and can do with a shell script. It's still very powerful and still has its place, but you need to. I think the lesson is learn to build tools that will reduce the amount of effort that you need to put into it, right? We want to be more agile and more, in order to be more successful and be more productive, really, is you build tools that will take away those repetitive tasks and automate those repetitive tasks so you don't have to do them over and over again. And so we have some excellent tools these days like Helm and whatnot that allow us to automate a lot of the finer detail of those complex things that we would have had to write shell scripts for in years gone by. Um, so
It's quite
it's
it's quite amazing how things have evolved, right? So if you stop to think for a second, it's quite an evolution.
it
And
is.
sorry, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to that.
Sure.
One aspect that I think I really enjoy thinking about, and I wish I was more involved with, and I'm not, because I'm not I don't work for NASA, but I think about the industry today, and I compare it. I like to compare the industry that we use, the industry and the technologies that we use to solve problems in the cloud, right? And I like to compare that to uh, the effort involved in much longer and older term projects, like, for instance, NASA and Voyager 2, right? I like to compare the operational complexity of those types of things. If you think about projects that have to live a very long time versus projects that really only have a short lifespan, the design choices you need to make are so vastly different. For instance, which is why, you know, in between cloud and space, you have things like telecommunications. And if you look at telecommunications software stacks and hardware stacks, you'll see a lot of 20-year-old technologies still being very effective because they were designed for longevity. They were designed for resilience. They were designed for resilience years before the complexity was necessary in our business applications. And so our business applications have complexity now because they benefit from things like Kubernetes. But if you go back to telephony and telecommunications 20 years ago, they were already doing complex things with much less technology. Like they already could orchestrate and do complex operational things 20 years ago with a completely different set of technologies. And so I really like, and this always brings me back to Voyager 1 and today, when I think of the engineers sitting in the NASA control room
Yeah.
trying to send a message that is going to take 48 hours to arrive at its destination, and then another 48 hours to get a response after that. And think about the operational stress of, like, we talk about, oh, our network connection died, so let's just restart the pod. Well, you can't do that if it's not even in our solar system anymore, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not only that, but we have a bug. Well, how do you fix a bug on a space vehicle that's billions of, millions of light years away? um, and how do you're not going to use Node, you're not going to use Java, you're not going to build, you're not going to rewrite the software because that old software is, does we don't like it anymore. It's not ergonomic in our, it doesn't work in VS Code or whatever, like we can't compile it, So I really like to think in terms of like the trade-offs we need to take depending on the kind of project we're working on. And a lot of people, when they think about code today, particularly the most modern generation of software engineer, their life expectancy for applications is almost in the months, almost measurable in months.
Hmm.
And that's the turnover time between when you build something, how it's going to be used, and then the time that you're going to throw it away and build the next new thing. Whereas if you think about delivering value for a longer time and lowering costs, you have to think about, if I build the software to how should I build the software so that it's still viable in 5 years or 10 years? Is a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I like that mind game of like, what would NASA do right now
Uh,
if they had to make a technology choice? Yeah.
uh, it's and talk about those 48 hours for the communication to go back and forth. It's
Yeah,
takes forever for the you do a ping. It takes forever for the reply to come back.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, but Ray, just talking about all this technology and all this career path that you had, and you have had exposure to so many different languages and technologies, and you saw the evolution of computing in general, right? Is there anything specific that you do not work with today that you may want to think about working with that technology or whatever that may be in the future? Any wishes or desires you may have?
Um, One thing that have I've always been on the periphery of, and but never really got to delve deeply into, is actually more hardware, like getting closer to the hardware, doing maybe embedded programming or working with ICs and logic controllers and programming at that level. I never really had the opportunity or the to do Arduino or Raspberry Pi or anything like that. I do have some, and I've done momentary little projects with them, but never to delve into the wider landscape. And I think if I really think that the most interesting technology that I don't know it is electronic engineering. If I really had, let's say, if I had a choice to do another degree, for instance, or go to university again, or to just invest a lot of time in a new career, it would probably be electronic engineering. Understanding,
Fantastic.
like it's that is super fascinating, how they solve problems and build technologies. uh, you know, I think that's really cool stuff.
Super cool. And talking a little bit more about that similar topic, but a different question here. Um, Looking back through time, and again, you have had a long list of changes in your life, right? But is there anything specifically looking back, do you think you'd like to change if you had a chance?
No, I don't think so. I think I've had my first of all, I've had an eclectic kind of career path,
Yeah.
and had an opportunity to do different things, and to see the world from different points of view. And I think it made me a better engineer. I think that's probably the most significant takeaway that we should all make, is that have even if we go through different careers in our lives, that you're never starting a new career at zero,
Mhm.
because in every career that you in every new career that you take, in some form, the old career has an effect, and will the knowledge you have from your previous career will be applicable in some degree to your new career. I think that is probably one of the most interesting aspects of computing, in fact, of computer science, is because unless you're a pure computer scientist or a pure software developer building software solutions for other software developers, you're usually working in some kind of domain, some kind of non-computing domain, finance, sports, uh, content management, like websites of various types, insurance companies, banking, uh, and so it is extremely useful to bring other career knowledge, other job knowledge to the to your computing career. It's hugely valuable. In fact, some of the best engineers I've worked with through my career had another previous career. They were either an engineer and they decided to switch to computers, or they were, I actually had the opportunity to work at Liferay with three different astrophysics PhDs working in software. And so if you think about it, like going from another career and then bringing that
Yeah.
knowledge into computing, it offers such a vast richness to your knowledge base, right? And it gives you a different perspective.
Hmm.
I think it makes better software engineers, to be honest.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Ray, any recommendations for those that are starting from scratch right now, or any? If I look at the people in Brazil who are members of the programming group that we have, and they're always asking, "Is this for me? Is it not for me? Where do I go?" I think they're looking for certainty as well, right? So they want to go into
Right.
the path, but they go, "Is it going to take me somewhere or not?" Any recommendations you may have for those that are listening to us and they're thinking, "Oh, should I follow a similar path to what Ray did, or what should I do regarding technology and potentially programming as well?"
Yeah, well, so the one thing that programming offers you with every other career is that every other career eventually needs programming, particularly in today's day and age, right? Every other career will eventually have a software problem to solve. Um, every other career generates data. It really comes back to data and data analysis. Everything is data analysis. Every stream of every career, or every different industry is what the word I'm looking for. Every industry generates data, and it tries to become smarter using that data. That's a programming problem. So whether you like animals, or you like sports, or you like the outdoors, or you like whatever it is that you like, if there's a data analysis problem there to be solved. So it's software is probably the only career that you can basically bring in whatever choice of other career that you want and put it and pair it together with it. So league, if you're interested in the law, or you're interested in immigration, or demographics, or geography, or geology, or any history, or literature, if you can bring all of those careers to computing, or you could bring computing to those careers. And so it doesn't matter, you can find a niche in any interest, any industry for computing. You can't say that for virtually all other jobs, right? So there's always going to be a set of problems there, and as we go more and more, as technology advances more and more, that's even more true. Because we all know AI is, like it comes back to that whole mantra: software is eating the world, right? Software is is becoming the solution to pretty much all of the problems that humans
Mhm.
have, and it comes back to trying to improve our world, right?
Yeah. And it's an avenue of opportunities, right? So
That's right.
looking back through your life, it's what brought a totally incredible adventure in career path for you, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible. And Ray, do you have any recommendations regarding books or music or games, anything that interests you, or any hobbies you may have that you want to share with people here?
Um, well, I have some hobbies. I probably don't have any book recommendations, mostly because these days the internet is the provider of knowledge, and as long as you find a reliable source of info, I haven't really taken a official book um, in many years. Although I do recommend most of the programming languages tutorials and documentations these days are pretty good. Particularly, the most recent one I've been subjected to is the Go programming book. It's an online book from the Go programming language or the Rust language. Those are very good books, just even for generic programmers if you want to learn. Although JavaScript, I know JavaScript is incredibly popular. So if you want to jump into something new, it's probably a very good choice. But any other programming languages out there are a good choice for learning. I recommend you read them all of the programming language books that you can. In fact, so don't hesitate with any of them. There will be value there. But as far as hobbies, I actually still like to do things with my hands a lot. So I I most recently I bought myself an excavator. If you
Whoa!
an excavator, yeah, because I want to do some work around the house, and it requires an excavator. So I like working with machinery still. I miss it from my previous career, and I do like to build things. So I still like to use my hands to build things at home and work with power tools and work with lately with heavy equipment and you know it, I guess I think the most significant thing, and it's something I learned from my parents, is never shy away from learning something new. I think that's incredibly important for people to try to adopt in their lives. Is um, People become afraid when they're faced with a new challenge that they haven't experienced before, but that's an opportunity to learn. It's always an opportunity to learn. And the worst thing that can happen is that you don't succeed right away. But we usually don't succeed at most things that we do right away. So it's just an opportunity to learn something new. And so if you always look at it from that perspective, every new challenge is an opportunity to learn, and that's usually where the fun stuff happens, is when you learn something new. So just think of every new challenge as an opportunity to learn, learn to love to learn. And you know I think you can be happy generally doing everything, because that's always going to happen, right? You're always going to have something new, and you can never know everything. So
It's a
don't
fantastic,
even try to know everything. Assume that you're not
yes,
going to know everything.
yeah, it's a fantastic recommendation. Right? So there's so much to learn. It's and with the internet out there, there's
That's right.
endless collection of subjects you can learn. Right? So it's just
Yeah.
incredible. It's a fantastic resource for sure. And Ray, we have been talking here for we're approaching 1 hour and 15 here. Are there any questions that I did not ask that you wish I had asked?
No, I think we had a good talk. I can't think
Excellent.
of anything that we missed.
Yeah. And would you like to share any contact information, any social media, LinkedIn, anything you want to mention here for anybody who wants to, contact you?
Yeah, so I'm Raymond Auger on LinkedIn. I think I do have a public profile there. That's probably the only social media network that I really use. And again, I'm not an avid LinkedIn user. I just use it. I'm not very socially active, but I don't mind it if people contact me. But yeah, LinkedIn would probably be the best way to contact me. Just
Fantastic.
use my name, Ray Augé, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
And Ray, before we close, I just want to take a moment here to thank you for your time. It's over 10 p.m. On Tide right now. It's been a privilege listening to your story a little bit more, and it's a privilege working with you as well. So thank you for the knowledge you share and everything you teach us every day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Your kind words. Thanks, Marcel.
Have a good evening, and stay with me 1 minute. I'm going to stop recording, and we'll talk for a minute more. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.